I was chosen as the daughter-in-law of the Kim family since childhood. At the age of 20, I married Oscar Kim, who had autism. After 5 years of marriage, Oscar always hated me. He wouldn't let me touch him, let alone share a bed with me. Later, he met a girl. He restrained all his temper in front of her, awkwardly trying to be well-behaved. He wrote songs for her and gave her gifts. Even the study, which he never let me step into, was completely open to that girl. I knew Oscar had someone he liked, and I no longer wanted to take care of him. So, I went to see old Master Kim. I told him I wanted a divorce. Chapter 1. Before I met Oscar, my life had never been easy. My mom was obsessed with looks and fell for my dad's face. She loved fiercely and blindly jumped into bed with him without checking his background. Then, she had me. Only after giving birth did my mom find out my dad was from a wealthy family, the kind who could wave his hand and ensure she'd never worry about food or money. But the bad news was, my dad had married into that wealthy family. In other words, he was a social climber, a man who relied on his wife to squeeze into high society. And my mom? She was his mistress. The legal wife caught them in the act. My mom was the one she found. Though my dad acted cocky around my mom, in front of his wife, he was as humble as a dog. He cut off all contact with my mom immediately, and he denied me as well. My mom raised me alone, and life was hard. She peddled a tricycle, ran street stalls, and once got chased for miles by city enforcers. She even lost a shoe while running. Eventually, she'd had enough. She said she wanted to secure a better future for me. I don't know how she did it, but she managed to get a paternity test proving I was my dad's child. Then, she stormed to his house, made a huge scene, and demanded he take responsibility. The wealthy family, afraid of a scandal, agreed. From then on, my mom and I were separated. The day I was sent to the Kim family, my mom cried as she smiled, "Sophia, you'll never go hungry again." But my mom was too naive. My dad saw me as a stain, and Mrs. Kim hated me too. The servants were quick to follow suit, and naturally, I got no kindness. As for my half-sisters, they came up with a new way to bully me every day. But my mom would never know about any of this. That day outside the Kim house was the last time I ever saw her. She had late-stage cancer and couldn't afford treatment. After giving me to my dad, she jumped into the river. I grew up in the Kim household as an adopted daughter, living cautiously. When I was 15, I met a boy at the Kim house. He had been pricked by rose thorns, and his arm was still bleeding, but he seemed completely unaware, sitting in the garden listening to music with his headphones on. I hesitated, then brought iodine to clean his wound and covered it with a band-aid. Later I learned his name was Oscar. His grandfather had brought him to the Kim family for a visit. For some reason, old Master Kim took a liking to me and wanted me to be his granddaughter-in-law. The Kim family was an old and prestigious clan, and my dad naturally agreed without hesitation. When my sisters heard about it, they laughed and mocked me. "Think you're marrying up? If it were such a great match, would it fall to you?" That Oscar has had autism and bipolar disorder since childhood. He's not even normal. But because of the engagement with Oscar, Mrs. Kim finally treated me a bit better. Life in the Kim house improved. At least they stopped bullying me. I often thought back to the first time I saw him. That thin boy quietly listening to music in the garden. He had no idea how much he helped me, without even trying. I was truly grateful to him. I began learning about his conditions, preparing myself for how to live with him in the future. Then, at the age of 20, under the arrangement of both families, I married Oscar. Chapter 2. I didn't know Oscar was so resistant to marrying me. After I married into the family, he never showed me a kind face. He wouldn't let me touch him, let alone share a bed. On our wedding night, he lost his temper at me in the bridal room. "Go away. Don't be in my room. Get out." I said get out. I hung my head in embarrassment, a wave of humiliation surging in my heart. That day, old Master Kim came to see me. He said Oscar had always been withdrawn since he was a child and didn't like contact with people. The aunt who used to take care of Oscar had just passed away, and he was in a particularly bad state. He asked me to be understanding and give Oscar some time. I nodded and agreed. Since then, I took on the task of caring for Oscar. running back and forth between school and the Kim household. I had to remind Oscar to take his medication on time, take him to regular hospital follow-ups, and arrange his meals and clothes. Fortunately, Oscar wasn't made of stone. He gradually started to respond to me, like no longer saying get out to me, like awkwardly covering me with a blanket when he saw me asleep on the couch, or making me a cup of brown sugar water when I had menstrual cramps. But he still never shared a bed with me. The Kim family lineage was passed down through a single male line, and Oscar was the only male in his generation. Old Master Kim had been eager to hold a great-grandson and had urged me many times. But with something like this, if he wasn't willing, there was nothing I could do. Finally, in the 5th year, Old Master Kim could no longer sit still. Without my knowledge, he drugged Oscar, then sent Oscar to my bed. He locked the door behind us, trapping us inside. That night is still vivid in my memory. Pain. It was excruciatingly painful. Under the influence of the drug, his eyes were hazy, and he acted on instinct. But he had no experience and was rough in his movements. I only felt an intense, tearing pain, and tears streamed down uncontrollably. As dawn approached, I could no longer bear it and passed out. The next day at noon, I was woken by the sound of things being smashed. Chapter 3. Oscar had a massive outburst. He smashed my phone, shattered the TV on the wall, and knocked over the table and chairs with a loud crash. When he saw I was awake, he walked up to me with a mirror in his hand. The mirror reflected my appearance. I hadn't even had time to put on clothes. My body was covered in red marks and bruises. He pointed at my reflection, his eyes full of undisguised disdain. You're dirty, disgusting. I hate you. I don't want to see you again. That day, I felt especially weak, stumbling even as I walked. But once Oscar had an episode, he disappeared. I had no choice but to go out and search for him. I skipped meals and searched from noon until after midnight. I went to nearly every place he frequented. By the end, my calves were trembling uncontrollably, but I still didn't find him. When I collapsed against the door in despair, out of breath, Oscar finally returned at 1 a.m. There was a girl standing beside him. She had a sweet smile with dimples. Looking up at him, she said, "I've never met someone with such similar interests. Meeting you was the best part of this concert." Only then did I realize Oscar had gone to a concert alone. His phone had died, and he couldn't remember the way home. It was the girl who brought him back. Oscar walked very slowly, though the way back was short. He took a long time. They talked about music, about composers and performers I didn't know. Oscar had loved music since he was young. He trained under masters and opened his own studio after graduation, creating many famous pieces. I stood at the door quietly listening. They talked for 30 minutes, and Oscar never noticed me. It was the butler who finally couldn't take it anymore and reminded him, "Young master, it's very late. Time to sleep. Madam has been waiting for you." The girl looked over at the sound, paused briefly, and asked Oscar, "Is that your wife?" An awkward look flashed across Oscar's face. After a moment of silence, he nodded, then quickly added, "It was forced. I don't like her. I hate her." At that moment, I stood frozen. A wave of shame surged over me, making me feel utterly humiliated. The girl's name was Chloe. Chloe tugged on his sleeve and smiled with crescent-shaped eyes. "It's late. Let's meet again another time." From that day on, my relationship with Oscar hit rock bottom. He wouldn't speak a word to me. On his birthday, I gave him a new pair of over-ear headphones. I'd heard the sound quality was excellent and they had sold out many times. I pre-ordered them 6 months in advance. But Oscar just used a lighter and burned them to pieces in front of me. "I don't like you. I don't like what you give me. Trash. I don't want it." That year, he spent his birthday out with Chloe. Since that night, he and Chloe had stayed in touch. Not long ago, Chloe even started an internship at his studio. One evening he came home wearing a silver ring. It was Chloe's birthday gift. Looking at the remains of the headphones scattered on the floor, I felt an overwhelming fatigue deep inside. The next day, Old Master Kim suddenly called, asking me to bring a document to his secretary. But I remembered Oscar never allowed me into the study. I hesitated. Old Master Kim urged me, saying the document was urgently needed and the secretary was already waiting at the door. After thinking it over, I retrieved the document. Before leaving, I restored everything in the study to its original state. But Oscar still found out I had gone in. His phone was connected to the study's surveillance. He rushed back from the studio, face filled with hostility and gloom. "You can't go in. You're not allowed." His emotions raged like an invisible storm inside the house. Because I retrieved a document from the study, he even had the entire room cleaned from top to bottom. I stared at him, dumbfounded, and voiced the question buried in my heart. Why can't I go in? Lately, Oscar often invited Chloe over to sit and chat. They discussed music in the study, sometimes for an entire day. Why was Chloe allowed in, but not me? And I'm not dirty. Why did you have people clean the study? His expression grew colder. She's not like you. She understands music. She's a kindred spirit. You don't understand. If you go in, it becomes dirty. Over the years, I had grown used to his curt manner and understood his meaning instantly. When he got emotional, I always soothed him first. But that day, though I knew he was furious, I couldn't bring myself to comfort him like before. I closed my eyes and said, "Oscar, the way you talk really hurts." At that moment, my low blood sugar hit. I staggered back a step. Unfortunately, I was standing right in front of the study door. The door wasn't closed, and that step backward made me accidentally enter the study. Oscar took it as provocation. His eyes turned cold, veins bulging on his forehead. He pointed at me and hurled countless harsh words, which ultimately came down to 3 lines. "Get out. This is my home, not yours. Get out of here. Don't ever show up in my house again." It wasn't the first time I had heard these words. When I first entered the Kim family, my half-sisters had said the same thing to me. Back then, I buried myself under the covers, crying in silence. I thought, someday I would have a home of my own, a home no one could kick me out of. After getting married, I mistakenly thought this villa with Oscar was my home. Even if it didn't shield me from the storm, it was still my haven. But today, he screamed that the house was in his name. The money was from his family, and this wasn't my home. He told me to get out. My emotions surged, and helplessness nearly swallowed me whole. I lowered my head and counted the years. It had been 10 years since I met Oscar at 15. At 15, because of our engagement, I had 5 years of peace. At 20, I married Oscar and cared for him devotedly for 5 years. 5 years for 5 years, the Kim family's favor was repaid in full. I was tired of this life. I wanted a divorce. Chapter 4. Once the thought of divorce takes root, it grows wildly like a seed breaking through the soil. A week later, I met with Old Master Kim. I told him I wanted a divorce. Old Master Kim sat on the sofa in the old house, tapping his index finger on the table. Why? I told him Oscar had someone he liked. He would temper his mood in front of her, awkwardly trying to be well-behaved. He would write her songs, give her gifts, stubbornly try to make her happy. With Chloe around, Oscar was in much better spirits. Objectively and subjectively, she was a better match for Oscar than I was. Old Master Kim didn't say anything after hearing this. After a long silence, he cleared his throat and asked seriously, "Sophia, do you know why I chose you to be my granddaughter-in-law? Because I gave Oscar a band-aid?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. I looked into you. I knew you were kind-hearted. And I also knew your position in the Kim family was awkward and unwelcomed. You needed this marriage. With this marriage, life would be much easier for you. For the sake of the Kim family's name, and for that very reason, you would treat Oscar like a lifeline, grateful, tolerant, even indulgent. When I found out you chose to study psychology in college, I knew I was right about you. You truly were that kind of person." He sighed. A child born into a family like Oscar's, if he weren't ill, would naturally be in high demand. But he happened to fall ill. I only have this one grandson, so of course I had to plan carefully to find him a wife who would be absolutely loyal and take care of him for life. This Chloe you speak of, I don't know what kind of girl she is. I can't entrust Oscar to her with peace of mind. At this point, he looked at me and spoke frankly. "Sophia, you grew up in the Kim family. You know what rich men are like. Having one woman outside is nothing. 10 wouldn't even be surprising. Compared to them, Oscar is innocent and not reckless. He's already much better. And besides, as long as I'm alive, no woman can shake your place as the official wife. What more could you possibly want? I understood what he meant, but I no longer wanted to spend my life caring for an autistic man, living a life that felt over before it even began. Oscar told me to leave. I said seriously to old Master Kim. Right now, my presence only irritates him. Recently, his episodes have also been occurring more frequently. Upon hearing this, old Master Kim's expression finally turned grave, and he began to reconsider my relationship with Oscar. After a long while, he finally relented. Sophia, let me think about the divorce. You go back for now. Also, Oscar is your husband. After all, this matter needs his input as well. I nodded and got up to leave. Why wouldn't Oscar agree? He'd be more than eager to sign the divorce papers. It rained lightly today, a fine spring drizzle, with strong winds outside. As I left the old house, I saw Oscar. He was standing by the half-closed door, wearing a white shirt and holding an umbrella. A large pool of rain had gathered at the tip of the umbrella. I didn't know how long he had been standing there, or how much he had overheard. The moment he saw me, he pressed his lips tightly together, his face pale. You said you want to divorce me? Chapter 5. After I gave him a definite answer, Oscar didn't speak right away, as if he were thinking about something. After a while, he asked, "Then after the divorce, will you still take care of me?" I was stunned for a moment, then let out a quiet laugh. Oscar, divorce means we become strangers from then on. I won't be your wife anymore, and I'll have no obligation to take care of you. Got it. The rain grew heavier, slanting in the wind and soaking one side of his shoulder. Oscar looked at me seriously and shook his head. No divorce. I truly didn't expect him not to want a divorce. Why? I asked him. If we divorce, no one will take care of me. Don't you like Chloe? She can take care of your daily needs. But Oscar still stubbornly shook his head. No, she's busy. She needs to create. She can't always be at home. You're free, so you take care of me. I lowered my head, staring at the water pooled in a shallow pit, feeling nothing but cold in my heart. He thought Chloe had her own pursuits and couldn't bear to keep her at home. But me, this dull and ordinary woman in his eyes, I was born to revolve around him. Oscar, if you need someone to take care of you, you can hire a maid. Before I came, wasn't Aunt Zhang taking good care of you? I tried to reason with him, but he held firm. He only wanted me to care for him. As he spoke, his hands clenched into fists, his palms gouged with deep marks. It was a sign his condition was flaring up. I didn't want to argue anymore and turned back into the house. He followed behind me, repeating over and over, "No divorce." When I didn't agree, he clawed at his hands until they bled. The Kim family was wealthy, they could easily hire help. I didn't understand why Oscar was being so stubborn. When I asked, he hesitated for a long time before saying 2 words. Used to. Habits form over time. I told him, when I first started taking care of you, you weren't used to it either, right? Everything takes getting used to. With enough time, you'll adjust. When he got stubborn, he was worse than a mule. Seeing I wouldn't give in, he began shouting, "No, no divorce. You have to listen to me." I knew that in moments like this, reasoning was useless, so I simply shut my mouth. He thought I'd agreed, and finally the tension in his brows eased. The moment he saw Chloe at the front door, his eyes lit up instantly. He threw the divorce talk out of his mind. He and Chloe went into the study together. Before going in, Oscar even locked the door, as if he were afraid someone might barge in. Soon, the sound of flowing piano music came from within, accompanied by the girls' bright laughter. Everything seemed full of life. Chloe didn't come out until 10 at night. Outside, it was pouring. Oscar glanced at the rain and called out to her, "It's raining. You'll catch a cold going out. Stay here tonight." Chloe blinked and smiled at him. "Dummy. I didn't bring pajamas. How can I stay over?" Oscar pointed at me. "She has some. Then we'll have to ask your wife if she agrees to let me stay tonight, and whether she's willing to lend me some clothes," Chloe said with a sweet smile, looking at me. But before I could respond, Oscar beat me to it. "She's willing. A faint dimple appeared on Chloe's cheek as she tilted her head and teased him. How can you just answer on someone else's behalf? Oscar pointed at the villa. This is my house, not hers. Then at the walk-in closet, the clothes were bought with my family's money. I make the decisions. So Chloe smiled sweetly at me and said, Mrs. Kim, I'll be staying tonight then. I hope I won't disturb your marital bliss. At that, Oscar reacted even more strongly than I did. He flailed, eager to explain. We don't. Stuff like that, disgusting. I listened quietly, never raising my head, flipping through my phone in silence. Oscar was right, this wasn't my home. I planned to move out. Chapter 6. Finding a suitable apartment wasn't easy. Back at the Kim family, I didn't have pocket money. If I needed something, I told the housekeeper, and as long as it was reasonable, the housekeeper would usually agree. After moving into the Kim family, Old Master Kim gave me 50,000 yuan a month for living expenses. It sounded like a lot, but it had to cover Oscar's medical fees, psychological therapy, nutritional meals, and the wages and meals of all the staff in the villa. After careful budgeting, I was left with only a few thousand each month, so my savings weren't much. After 2 days of searching, I found an apartment at a reasonable price. While I was packing my clothes, Oscar happened to come home. Since I brought up the divorce, his attitude had softened slightly. Occasionally, he would even start a conversation. Like now, he asked me, "Are you throwing these away?" I shook my head. No. He pointed at the pile of clothes. Throw them out. They're ugly. You don't understand fashion. You can't match clothes. These clothes, all ugly. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. Then what kind do you think look good? He thought seriously for a moment and replied, like Chloe's. Pretty. You should learn from her. I have money. I can buy them for you. I looked at the white dress on top of the pile and paused slightly. It was the dress Oscar had picked out for me a year ago when we went shopping together. I still clearly remember his reaction when I stepped out of the fitting room. He stammered over and over, saying just 2 words. Looks good. But it was still the same dress. And now he found it outdated and ugly. Was it the dress that had changed? Or the person? I lowered my lashes. My hands still busy. No need. I like my own style. Oscar's eyes gradually filled with annoyance. He dropped a curt "suit yourself" and turned to leave. The door slammed shut with a loud bang that made my eardrums ache. That night, he didn't come out of his room again, so he didn't know I had left the villa. When I first came to the Kim family, I had only a 24-inch suitcase and a blue backpack. When I left, I still had just that. Oscar was right, this wasn't my home. So the things that truly belonged to me were pitifully few. I stayed in the apartment for just 1 day before setting off for Spring City. When I was little, my mom always told me life would get better and better. Once she had saved enough money, she'd take me traveling. After she passed away, I comforted myself the same way, life would get better and better. Once I saved enough money, I'd go on a trip myself. But life rarely goes as planned. I had only leapt from one cage into another. Oscar couldn't be left alone, and I couldn't travel far. I had tried taking him with me, but he had lived his whole life in that city and struggled to adapt to change. Lacking a sense of security, he was restless and agitated on the train. Even eating became a problem. I had no choice but to get off at the next stop and return home. The excitement I felt while planning the trip was replaced by equal dejection when I got off. So it turns out that saving enough money doesn't mean you can travel. Because of ties, because of time. But now, I finally stood at the foot of Songshan Mountain. The wind ruffled the waters of Arai Lake and reshaped the clouds above. Listening to music, riding my bike along the paths, I passed fields of wheat, open plains, shimmering reflections, and clouds cradled by the mountains. Every rule-bound rhythm was shattered in the sound of Arai's waves. Life became light and unrestrained, and I became a useless but vivid person. A large group of spiritually weary people had gathered here, setting up all kinds of small stalls. We sat on the ground beneath the stars, sharing our stories. There was a girl who had quit her medical job after nearly burning out. She said, "Here, life was no longer chopped into fragments by weekends." There was also a patient in recovery who said no one knows what the future holds. But at least now, they were growing. We met briefly, touched the softest, most hidden corners of each other's hearts. Then, like the 18 streams of sunshine, we flowed off in our own winding paths. Later, I went alone to Longkin Wharf to watch the sunrise. The waves of Arai shattered the sunlight into shimmering silver coins. I didn't cry when I was struggling to survive in the Kim household. I didn't cry when Oscar lashed out and kicked me out. But now, I covered my face, my shoulders trembling uncontrollably. I had never felt freedom so deeply before. No alarms at set times, no cluttered reminders in my planner. I could respond to the call of the distant mountains and daydream all day long. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I reinserted my SIM card. Before leaving the Kim family, I had sent old Master Kim a brief text explaining the situation. Today, when I turned the phone back on, it was filled with missed calls. From my dad, from old Master Kim, and from Oscar. On the return trip, I called old Master Kim. Sophia. His voice was filled with fatigue. Come back soon, Oscar. He's not doing well. Chapter 7. I still ended up returning to the Kim house. After I left, Oscar got very angry. He didn't know how to live his life. For example, all those bottles in the medicine cabinet, he didn't know how many pills to take each day. Before, I'd always prepare the water and place the pills in front of him. That day, he had a press conference, but he couldn't find the matching tie for his suit. He tried to contact me, but couldn't reach me. The butler said Oscar had a major meltdown. He smashed all the cups and bowls, pushed over the standing air conditioner, and even flipped the coffee table and dining cabinet. The house was in complete chaos. Old Master Kim had no choice but to find a new caretaker for him. But the new maid didn't understand Oscar and was at a total loss. When I came back, Oscar looked noticeably thinner. His chin had even become sharp. When he saw me, he furrowed his brow and turned his head coldly. Humph. What are you doing back? Weren't you leaving? I hate you, liar. While I was traveling, old Master Kim found the landlord of my rental. I don't know what he said, but the landlord refused to rent the apartment to me again, so I brought my luggage back once more. Oscar glanced at my suitcase and snorted. Kim family doesn't want you. You've got nowhere to stay. Had to come crawling back. Didn't you? I didn't explain, just silently carried my luggage back to the room. At the moment I turned my back, Oscar's lips subtly curled upward. He seemed to be in a good mood. He didn't know the real reason I came back. Even if the apartment was gone, I could still rent another one. I could even leave the city and start fresh somewhere new. I had talked a lot with old Master Kim over the phone. I told him I'd looked into the marriage law. I could file for divorce first, even if it failed. It didn't matter. I'd separate from Oscar for a year, then sue again. By law, I'd win the second time. He asked why I was so determined after the divorce. I'd gain nothing, and he was right. Old Master Kim was very shrewd. Before the wedding, he had me sign a prenuptial agreement with Oscar. All of Oscar's assets, including the studio, were premarital. If we divorced, I'd leave with virtually nothing. I know, but I still want to leave. The marriage protected me for 5 years, and I cared for him for 5 years. We're even now, it's over. On the other end of the line, old Master Kim was silent for a long, long time. Just when I thought he was going to hang up, he said, I hired a new maid, but she doesn't know how to take care of Oscar. Take care of him for 1 more month and help her transition. As compensation, I won't block the divorce, and I'll give you an extra $1 million. The offer was too generous for me to refuse. So Oscar didn't know this would be my final month by his side. The butler said that while I was gone, he didn't eat properly, but that night, Oscar ate 2 bowls of rice. He gave a little snort. Praise me. I smiled, and like before, softly said, very good. A beautiful curve lifted the corners of his lips. Once he went back to the study, I quickly told the new helper, Sister Han, he likes being praised. Praise him more often. If he makes a mistake, don't point it out immediately, wait until later and casually mention it. Sister Han pulled out a small notebook and carefully jotted everything down. I then took her to the medicine cabinet and explained how many times a day and how many pills per dose for each medicine. Make sure he takes the meds with water, not too hot. Best if it's warm water, around 40 degrees Celsius. His ties and cufflinks are in the second drawer of the wardrobe. He needs a glass of hot milk before bed. I passed all his habits to Sister Han, who took diligent notes. Since I returned, Oscar's life had settled back into rhythm, and there hadn't been another episode. But that day, when Sister Han brought him his medicine, the sound of a cup shattering suddenly rang out from the room. Chapter 8. When I rushed over, the floor was a complete mess. Broken glass and scattered pills were everywhere. Oscar stood barefoot, having stepped on a shard of glass. Blood was oozing out. He didn't seem to notice, just pointed at Sister Han and asked me, word by word, "Why her? Why not you? This is clearly what you used to do. Why switch?" As he spoke, he grabbed my sleeve, shaking his head. "I don't want anyone else. I only want you to give me my medicine." So, once again, I poured water and handed him his pills. His emotions rose quickly and faded just as fast. Only after watching him obediently take the medicine I gave him did I ask, "Why does it have to be me, when it wasn't you?" I felt a little scared. I asked softly, "Scared of what?" "Scared that you're going to hand me over to someone else, and then leave me, abandon me." I had to admit, his intuition was sharp. I had indeed been transitioning responsibilities to Sister Han, letting her slowly take over Oscar's care. Oscar still clutched my sleeve. "I want you to keep doing it. No one else. Promise me you won't leave." Knowing Oscar's stubborn nature, if I told him the truth, he would certainly cause a huge scene. I didn't want to spend any more energy calming his emotions, so I looked him in the eye and lied to him. "Okay, I promise. I won't leave, and I won't switch with anyone else." Only half a month left, just another couple of weeks of giving him medicine. Oscar smiled contentedly, the corners of his lips curving up. He didn't notice that his leg was still bleeding, and this time, I didn't fetch the iodine to clean his wound as I usually would. He didn't notice the pity in Sister Han's eyes either. Everyone knew I was leaving, everyone but him, still lost in his own world. That afternoon, I saw Chloe again. She stood at the villa gate, her eyes fixed on the floor-to-ceiling window of the second-floor study. Oscar was sitting by the window, head down, playing the piano. Chloe lingered for a long time, but instead of seeking out Oscar, she came to me. She handed me a stack of yellowed sheet music. "He's been looking for this piece. Please give it to him for me." I paused slightly. "Oscar is just upstairs. Why don't you give it to him yourself?" "No." Chloe shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. "He doesn't want to see me anymore." That's when I realized Chloe used to visit the Kim house every other day, but recently she hadn't appeared at all. Even the ring she had given Oscar had vanished. "Mrs. Kim." Chloe's soft voice interrupted my thoughts. She asked me, "I like Oscar, you've noticed, haven't you?" I nodded. It was obvious. At the music festival, everyone was in groups, but he was all alone, out of place. I noticed him right away. He was so beautiful. I don't even remember what piece he was playing. I was too busy staring at him. When I found out his phone was dead, I took the chance to offer him a ride home. I'm not a fool. Just a few words with him and I knew he wasn't like most people. But I found that side of him especially adorable and pure. As she spoke of Oscar, a gentle smile bloomed in Chloe's eyes. "After you left, old Master Kim contacted me, saying you were pushing for a divorce. When I heard that, I was actually really happy. I always believed you and Oscar came from two different worlds. He lives in the realm of art, while you're grounded in the mundane. Oscar and I share the same idols, the same taste in music. We can talk endlessly about it. I thought I was a better match for him. I even encouraged Oscar to divorce you. I told him I could take over his care. But do you know what happened?" Chapter 9. Chloe stood at the villa's entrance talking to me. I asked if she wanted to come inside and sit for a while. She lifted her gaze slightly, her eyes landing on Oscar upstairs, and shook her head. Chloe said that after I left, she stayed with Oscar at the villa for a few days. They talked about music in the study, but once they left the study, Oscar began talking about me. I made him a strawberry cake. He paused for a moment and actually told me it was your favorite. "There's a row of dolls on the living room sofa. He said you sewed them by hand. You even named each one together. On the windowsill in his room, there are photos of you too." I tried to count how many, but I couldn't finish. Do you know what really got to me? Chloe looked up at me, her eyes dim. He played a chord and said the melody suited you. He's never been apart from you for this long. He said he missed you. These things, I truly hadn't known. And then? I wanted to know why Oscar suddenly didn't want to see her. Then I realized that despite knowing Oscar for so long, he never talked to me about anything but music. We'd never had any physical contact either. I asked him if he would divorce you. He didn't even hesitate. He flatly said no. That night, I lost it a bit. I wanted to prove he liked me. So I went into his room, took off my clothes in front of him, and asked him to try with me. He'd said being with you was disgusting. If he was willing to be with me, wouldn't that prove he liked me? I didn't say anything, just quietly listened to Chloe finish. I didn't expect his reaction. Shock, fear, panic, disgust, rejection. I can't even describe how complex his expression was. But he was furious. He threw my hand off and kicked me out. Before I left, his face was flushed with anger. He said he thought I was different from others, but I turned out to be just as vulgar. He told me not to come looking for him again, that he didn't want to see me anymore. Chloe lowered her lashes, hiding the loneliness in her eyes. When I left, he was sitting in the pile of dolls on the couch, softly calling your name. When I liked a married man, I used to tell myself Oscar didn't love you, that you had tied down his innocent self with marriage, that the one unloved was the third party. But now, she said, looking far off at the man behind the glass, letting out a long sigh, I still like him, but I know now, it's impossible. Please give this to him for me. I searched for this score for a long time, whether Oscar didn't see her or didn't want to. Chloe stood at the Kim family's door for over an hour, and he never once looked down at her. When she left, she walked slowly, but even until she vanished from my sight, she never managed to meet the eyes of the one she wanted to see. Lately, Oscar had been clinging to me. He even started striking up conversations just for the sake of talking. He asked me where I'd gone during that half month I was gone. I showed him the photos and videos from my trip and shared all the fun experiences. At the March Street Market, they sold brooches and earrings made from Songshan fruits. So creative, you would have loved them if you'd seen them. Have you heard of tie-dye wakats, plant rubbing prints, and stamp carvings? Look, I made these myself. They're really meaningful. I even went up the mountain with the villagers to pick mushrooms, followed the stream through the valley, and filled a whole basket. It was the first time I truly felt the joy of a harvest. Oh, sorry. Am I talking too much? I wasn't usually a talkative person, but for some reason, when Oscar asked about my travels, I couldn't stop talking. I didn't even give him a chance to speak. Oscar just smiled and rested his chin on his hand, watching me. It's okay. You talk. I'll listen. He listened quietly to my vivid stories. Then, suddenly, he asked, do you really like traveling? I nodded without hesitation, but I always feel safest at home. But it's fine, I'll try. I blinked. Try what? Oscar kept fiddling with the wakat I made, not answering. Lately, he hadn't been going to the studio and preferred staying home. That day, he suddenly called my name from the study. Sophia. I asked what he needed. He opened the door and motioned me in. Come in. I still remembered his fury the last time I entered the study, so I didn't move and remained standing at the door. But he grabbed my sleeve and pulled me in. From now on, you can come in. No one else can. Only you. I have a gift for you. Chapter 10. The study was spacious. Besides the desk and chair, there was a white grand piano. Today, Oscar was dressed in a black suit, with a tie to match. He only dressed this formally when he was about to perform. The floor-to-ceiling window cast the sunset's light onto Oscar, bathed in the golden hues of dusk. The ends of his hair were tinged with light gold. His eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings as his fingers danced, notes pouring from his fingertips. Some people are born tone-deaf. Like me. I don't understand adagios or legatos. I only know that in this moment, the music layered over itself again and again, like the dense waves of the early spring sea, rising in peaks and swirling in echoes. To call it romantic feels too cliché. To call it profound, too intense. I listened quietly. When the piece ended, he looked up at me. Did it sound good? I nodded sincerely and clapped. Beautiful. It's just a draft. Needs more work. He pointed to the thick stack of sheet music. After some revisions, it'll be better. I really liked the piece. So I asked, "What's it called?" Oscar hesitated, then answered softly, "Haven't thought of a name yet. This piece is for you. It's a birthday gift. Your birthday's coming up." I was stunned. I hadn't expected such a gift from him. He chuckled lightly, then suddenly changed the subject. "Do you know why I got sick?" I had asked old Master Kim before, and he told me Oscar's condition was due to poor care from a nanny. But Oscar said, "It wasn't the nanny, it was my parents." He was silent for a moment, as if preparing to explain everything to me, but his fingers were trembling. Just recalling the past seemed to drain all his strength. "It's okay. If it's too painful, you don't have to tell me." I poured him a glass of warm water. He clenched his teeth. "No, I need to say it. You should know." After building up to it for a long time, he finally opened his mouth with difficulty. "My dad chased my mom for a long time before she agreed to marry him. 2 years later, my mom found out that my dad, aside from her, had other women. The first time, she was furious. My dad got on his knees and promised to change. But then it happened again, a second, a third, a fourth time. I even saw my dad with someone else at home. It was disgusting. My mom couldn't take it anymore and moved out with me. My dad came to beg her for forgiveness. She softened again and went back home. After returning, my mom found out that my dad hadn't broken it off with the other woman. He even brought her along when he came to apologize. My mom was putting me to bed in one room while my dad slept with that woman in the next. But this time, my mom didn't cry or make a fuss. She was strangely calm. She even invited my dad on a trip. It was our first and only family vacation. He clutched his sleeve tightly, trying to suppress the surging emotion. That night, in a strange city, my mom took a knife and stabbed it into my dad's chest. My dad, covered in blood, fought back, strangling my mom. I was locked on the balcony, pounding on the door, unable to get out. When I woke up, my parents never moved again. I froze. This was nothing like the version I had heard. The love story of Mr. and Mrs. Kim was said to be a legend among the wealthy. Mr. Kim had been engaged to someone else but fell for the humble-born Mrs. Kim at first sight. She initially refused to get involved in a noble family, but he pursued her for 4 years until she was moved and agreed to marry him. They were said to be happily married, and soon after, Oscar was born. But the bliss didn't last. During a trip, Mrs. Kim supposedly died of a heart attack, and Mr. Kim, unwilling to let her die alone, took his own life. Who would have thought that beneath this romantic tale lay a cruel and bloody truth? Oscar had witnessed the death of both his parents when he was only 6, his mind still undeveloped. He suffered a severe illness and woke up different. Now I finally understood why Oscar lacked a sense of security when going out, and why he resisted marriage and intimacy. Sophia, I'm telling you this so you can know the real me, completely. He sat beside me, hesitated, then slowly, hesitantly, placed his palm over the back of my hand. "I know I'm sick. I'll work through it. You can come into the study from now on. I won't scold you. You can hold my hand. I won't shake you off. I'll take my meds obediently and won't lash out at you anymore." He looked at me earnestly, such sincerity, as if he wanted to hand me his whole heart. For the first time, I truly felt the warmth of his palm. Maybe it was the lighting, but his voice sounded especially gentle. "Sophia, let's go on a trip. I'll try going somewhere new. When we come back, I'll celebrate your birthday." He took my hand and studied the map intently, looking at the cities marked. As the sky darkened, I called Old Master Kim. I told him Oscar wanted to travel. Old Master Kim paused for a moment, then asked, "Have you finished transitioning everything with Sister Han?" There was less than a week until I would leave. If we traveled, I would likely leave directly after returning. "Everything's been explained to Sister Han." Old Master Kim gave a quiet if he's willing to go out. "That's good. Take him around a bit." After much discussion, Oscar and I decided to go to Inner Mongolia. Chapter 11. Oscar researched the travel guides and planned the itinerary. He even brought out a camera. "I can take pictures of you, help you document everything." He was meticulous by nature. He filled the schedule to the brim. even deciding in advance what we would eat each day. Our destination this time was Ulaanbaatar. On the plane, I could clearly sense Oscar's emotional fluctuations, perhaps due to past experiences of being locked on balconies. He didn't like confined spaces like this. Just like the time we took the high-speed train, he became extremely anxious and uneasy. Sitting beside me, he tugged at my sleeve and leaned closer and closer. Planes are different from trains, you can't get off halfway. If it's too uncomfortable, let's go back. Don't push yourself. Oscar pursed his lips and shook his head. It's fine. Let's go. I don't want to spoil your mood again. When the plane took off, he held my hand, his palm already damp with sweat. We hit a strong convective current mid-flight, and the turbulence was intense. Oscar didn't open his eyes the whole time, pretending to nap, but the sweat-soaked hair on his forehead and the tight grip on my hand betrayed his real emotions. He was terrified. After landing in Chifeng, we still had a 4-hour car ride. Oscar remained tense the entire time. The completely unfamiliar climate and environment made him more anxious and sensitive than usual. I comforted him the whole way, and he forced a smile at me. Sophia, I'm fine. I took it at face value and brought him to the hotel suite, where I first took a hot shower. When I came out, I saw Oscar crouched in the corner, trembling slightly. When he saw me, he exhaled deeply, rummaged through his suitcase, and fed himself 2 sedatives. Before I could speak, he stood up and pretended nothing happened. I'll shower now too. I'm fine, really fine. Don't worry. That night, he tossed and turned for a long time, unable to fall asleep. Over the years, he had never slept anywhere but the bed in the villa. He was clearly unused to new places. I asked softly, "Want me to tell you a bedtime story?" "No need. I'm about to fall asleep. You sleep too. Tomorrow, we'll see the grasslands together." After that, he didn't move again, lying still as if asleep. But the dark circles under his eyes the next day revealed he hadn't rested well. He barely ate and frequently popped pills into his mouth. I had long yearned to see the Great Plains, but seeing him in such poor condition, my focus shifted completely to him. I didn't even get a chance to enjoy the morning mist over Princess Lake. After all, I brought him out, so I had to take him home safely. Oscar pointed toward the distant rolling hills. "Don't look at me. Look over there. You go ahead. I'll take a picture." He raised his phone to snap photos, but his hands trembled slightly as he clicked the shutter. A nearby tourist noticed him and softly exclaimed, "Why does his face look so pale, like he's got altitude sickness?" "No way. The elevation isn't even 2,000 meters. Oscar looked at me and tried to explain. "Just need a little time to adjust. I'm okay." He took a lot of photos of me, but he never seemed satisfied. "No, that's not right." I asked what was wrong, but he didn't answer. His hands were twisting his sleeves into a knot. An old man passed by and shook his head with a sigh. "Young people these days really love taking pictures. Your partner looks sick, and instead of taking him to the hospital, you're still snapping photos." Oscar lowered his head awkwardly, staring at the tips of his shoes, and took a deep breath. "Sophia, let's take pictures later. Let's walk for a bit first." We strolled together across the grasslands, watching nearby couples run freely against the mountain wind. I looked at their backs and murmured, "So free." He tried to quicken his pace and run with me across the open field, but the unfamiliar environment made him extra cautious. He couldn't feel that sense of freedom like ordinary people did. He could only say, "Sophia, you run. I'll record it." "No need. Let's just walk slowly together." There were haystacks rolled up by herders along the way, and cows and sheep often passed us by. It was peaceful, in its own way. But Oscar said nothing, a self-mocking curve tugging at his lips. We'd only been out for 3 days, yet he was visibly thinner, noticeably more haggard. If travel was a recharge for me, then for him, it was a form of torment. All the bottled-up tension had to break eventually. That day, I tried horseback riding. Oscar stood in place, raising his camera to take pictures of me. The horse started walking, then gradually picked up to a light trot. Oscar kept pressing the shutter again and again. I was immersed in the thrill of galloping, slowly closing my eyes. Then, I heard a sharp, panicked scream. I snapped back instantly. It was Oscar's voice. Chapter 12. Oscar had an episode. The trigger was a couple nearby, For some reason, they got into a heated argument. The man shouted that he'd beat the woman when they got home. The woman replied that if he dared leave, she'd stab him to death. Marital arguments often involve harsh words. Everyone around them kept their distance, everyone except Oscar, who slowly turned his head and stared at them. As the fight escalated, Oscar's breathing grew heavier. Maybe it was the constant tension of the past few days. Or maybe something in their words brought back terrible memories. When the man shoved the woman to the ground, Oscar rushed forward to shield her. And then, he broke down. When Oscar had an episode, he couldn't control his emotions. I stayed by his side, soothing him over and over again. It wasn't until the sun dipped below the horizon that he finally calmed down. Sophia, I'm sorry for worrying you. He sat on the grass, hugging his knees, eyes downcast. Coming out with me must have been terrible, right? I gently shook my head. No, it wasn't. But you're not happy. I saw the pictures from your trip to Dolly. You looked so alive, so vibrant. After we came home, you never smiled like that again. I wanted to make you happy. That's why I asked you to come travel with me. But in the photos I took of you, you're nowhere near as bright as you were in those strangers' pictures from Dolly. When you were riding a horse, I finally got one photo I was proud of. Just one. And then I had an episode. Sophia, I'm so useless. Being with me, even traveling can't help you relax. How could anyone relax while traveling with someone who might have an episode at any moment? Everything he said was true. I couldn't refute it. I sat beside him on the grass, watching the sun sink into the horizon. He sat there, the light in his dark eyes sparse and fragmented, and said in a hoarse voice, Sophia, I really am a terrible person. Night fully fell. I stood up and brushed the grass from my clothes. Stop overthinking. We already booked return tickets for tomorrow. The trip is almost over. We'd return tomorrow. The day after that would be my birthday. And the day after that I could leave with $1,000,000. Oscar stood and followed me, looking downcast and silent. Even during the return trip, he was unusually quiet, occasionally picking up his phone to make arrangements. Once home, he finally seemed to relax, his breathing more even. That night, just before bed, he hesitated for a long time before saying, Good night, Sophia. Tomorrow, I have a new birthday gift for you. I thought the birthday gift would be a song or an item. But the next day, he showed up at my door in a suit. Sophia, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to file for divorce. Oscar was always a stubborn person. Once he made up his mind, he never changed it. So after he said he wouldn't divorce, I had prepared myself for a year or two of legal battles. I never imagined he'd change his mind at the last minute. I couldn't help but ask, why? He answered calmly, You're not happy. I don't want to hold you back anymore. He even tried to sound lighthearted, his beautiful eyes curling in a faint arc. But beneath them, they were bloodshot. Sophia, I'm a twisted, slow person. I didn't even realize I loved you until after you left. I used to think darkly, that I'd do anything to keep you tied to my side. But when you're with me, you're not happy. Really, not at all. His voice broke, and his eyes reddened. I've burdened you long enough. I don't want to make you sad anymore. So, I'm letting go. It was the first time I saw him cry. I always thought someone like him didn't cry. But in the car on the way to the Civil Affairs Bureau, his tears were scalding as they hit the palm of my hand, like an endless spring rain. When we arrived at the bureau, he wiped his tears with the back of his hand, with reddened eyes. He opened the car door for me, forcing a strained smile. Sophia, my gift for your 25th birthday is freedom. Chapter 13. The divorce cooling off period lasted 30 days. During those 30 days, old Master Kim tried to make me stay. He asked, Oscar has already realized his feelings for you. Do you really still want a divorce? If you stay, you'll have a better life. I shook my head. No, he couldn't quite understand. Sophia, nothing happened between him and Chloe, and now he loves you. His feelings just came a little late. Are you really going to leave him like this? Can't you give him another chance? But I still shook my head. No, once a person has tasted freedom, they can never willingly be bound again. News of my leaving the Kim family caused a major stir. My father called to scold me for a long time. Mrs. Kim also reproached me. They said I should be grateful to Oscar. If the Kim family hadn't chosen me back then, they would have married me off to some arranged match. Maybe a widowed middle-aged man. Or maybe some greasy guy with a thing for young girls. What more do you want? Do you know your sister's husband already has 3 kids with women outside? And she can endure it, why can't you? In the end, my father threatened to sever ties with me. I nodded. Okay. 30 days later, Oscar and I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to collect our red divorce certificates. Along with the red certificate came a check. Oscar's assets were estimated to be worth around $1 billion. The check was for $1 billion. He handed the check to me. Sophia, may you go further, climb higher, and venture into a broader world. And, will I still get to see you again? I nodded. Of course. I'll invite you to my birthday banquet every year. Oscar sighed, then finally smiled. He turned 1,000 words into one sentence. Sophia, take care. Chapter 14 Extra Oscar. The first time I realized I liked Sophia was at the old house. That day, she told my grandfather she wanted a divorce. My immediate reaction was resistance. When I realized I didn't want a divorce, I froze. Because of my parents, I had always hated, rejected, even feared marriage. I had always felt that Sophia was binding me with marriage. I had always looked forward to the day I could be free from it. But when that day actually arrived, I resisted it with all my heart. I lied to myself, and to Sophia, saying I was just used to her being around. I deliberately let Chloe stay. Deliberately said Chloe's clothes were beautiful. I wanted to prove that I didn't like Sophia, didn't like the woman my grandfather had forced onto me. Then, Sophia left. When I found out, I was furious, anxious, and full of regret. I was mad she left without a word. Mad she abandoned me, desperate to get her back. Chloe showed up then, encouraging me to go through with the divorce. She even undressed, trying to get me to do that kind of thing. A surge of nameless rage rose within me. I've always been repulsed by intimacy, never wanting to do that with anyone. But in that moment, one strange thought popped into my head. If it were Sophia, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. That's when I realized I could no longer lie to myself. I had fallen for Sophia. I missed her terribly. When I missed her, all I could do was bury my face in the stuffed dolls she had sewn. Then, she finally came back. I still played tough, but inside, I was overjoyed. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was handing things over, pushing me toward that new caretaker, Sister Han. I was scared she would leave me again. If she were going to die, I wanted her to die by my side. So, I deliberately tried to win her back, talked to her, wrote her songs, opened up, but I could see she wasn't happy. In front of me, she was always lifeless, like a numb, walking corpse. But in those travel videos, she had been so full of life. I wanted to make her happy, so I invited her to travel with me. And that's when I finally understood it wasn't travel that gave Sophia life. It was being away from me that brought her back to life. Even traveling with me, she was utterly exhausted. She had to constantly monitor me in case I had another episode. She could never truly relax. That day, sitting on the grasslands of Ulaanbaatar, I suddenly ached for her. Why had her luck been so bad that she had to meet someone like me? Would she even be able to smile again if she stayed with me? I thought, if that's the case, then let me give her freedom. The gift I originally planned for her 25th birthday was that song. It had taken so much effort to write, but something always felt missing. I don't like incomplete things. Maybe it was fate. I needed to change the gift. So, I gave her freedom instead. And with it, the check she deserved. She had suffered enough over the years. After the divorce, I locked myself in the study. Over and over, I stared at the song I wrote for Sophia. I revised it countless times and was never satisfied. Until one night, Sophia appeared in my dream. At 15, she smiled at me in the rose garden. Aren't you afraid of pain? You're bleeding so much and don't even care. At 20, she looked at me and smiled. Oscar, can I take care of you from now on? At 25, she shyly handed me an earbud. Here, your birthday gift. I had to fight hard to get it. When I woke, My pillow was soaked. Then I knew what the song had been missing. I locked myself in the study for 2 more days. Recorded it at the studio. It was the best piece I'd ever written. I named it Sophia, dedicated to my eternal love. Sophia became very popular. I gave the rights to her. It was hers to begin with. We agreed to meet once a year. The rest of the time, I could only follow her social media. I watched every video she posted. Horseback riding, racing, skiing, that quiet, rule-abiding woman inside. She had such a wild, unrestrained soul, a beautiful flower, which I had nearly withered. But after leaving me, she bloomed again. It was wonderful. Every year from then on, I looked forward to Sophia's birthday, because only on that day, I could see her thriving. Chapter 15. That year on my birthday, many of my friends came. Oscar, as always, was the earliest to arrive. He sat quietly in a corner. Every birthday, he would bring me a gift, always the most extravagant of them all. Old Master Kim once asked if I wanted to remarry Oscar. He said that since I left, Oscar had remained single. I chuckled softly and shook my head in refusal. I had once truly loved Oscar. He was the boy of my dreams during my youthful infatuation. But as the years flowed like water, that love eventually wore away. He, too, became someone I left in yesterday.